You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage.
And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won.
It's being called worse than Watergate.
With Broken Truth, I'm John Davidson. Sorry for the stuttery intro. That's how it works. Today, I have a horse master, musician, and author.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show, John.
William Simpson. Yeah, you're. Just to give a quick rundown. William is in California, where everybody does everything right, and William helps. William helps wild horses. He helps save wild horses, and he's learned a couple of interesting facts about how wild horses can help stop wildfires, which, of course, is why the federal government wants to kill them. Welcome, William.
I really appreciate your time, John.
You're very welcome. We spoke last week at length a little bit, and you gave me some interesting information about this wild horse situation. I would say probably when it comes to wild horses, I'm pretty unaware of the situation, like most people. But can you kind of explain what's going on and why you're involved?
Sure. So, I look like a hayseed, but I was formally educated at Oregon State. I've got quite a few different vocations. I'm a retired United States Merchant Marine officer. I'm coming to you from my cabin up on the mountain where we live off grid. That means totally off grid. Wood in the morning to heat the cabin. So that's the first chore. But just to give your audience just a quick little idea of who I am and what I'm about. Grew up on a ranch, working ranch. We had cattle and horses, domestic horses. Went to Oregon State as a pre-med science major, and into flight training. And I wanted to initially, but I had some changes in where I wanted to go. My vision changed a little bit, and I wanted to see the world, and I had an opportunity, helicopters and airplanes and things like that. So I went through flight training, became a commercial instrument, a helicopter and airplane jet pilot. I fly turbine aircraft. And went through the Maritime Academy and stars, all that good stuff. Ran a medical missionary ship for a while, helping kids in the South Pacific, and formed a couple companies around my various inventions, including an internet company, and made enough money to finally end up retiring up here on the mountain. I was able to bunk a land and in the wilderness and be debt free. And then when I started seeing what the horses were doing using my training, I was really kind of amazed at what I was seeing, because I grew up on a ranch and my dad always called horses hay burners. There was always a derogatory term for a horse, a cayuse or a hay burner, but when I started watching these horses, I quickly realized they're an essential part of the environment, because they're like lawnmowers. They're out here mowing the grass, and a lot of people don't study fire ecology. I studied some of that, and when you see those little lines on the side of the road, it says "Fire Danger Today," and the little arrow, and it goes from green to red. Mm-hmm. Well, that arrow is based upon the moisture content of the 1 hour class fuels. Now, what's a 1 hour class fuel? Class fuel is anything that's a quarter inch in diameter and smaller. Those are the deals. Okay. Those are kindling. They burn really hot. They burn hotter than a forest fire. So I was watching them mow that stuff down, and at the same time they're reseeding, because I also know about their biology and their anatomy and how things move through their bodies compared to a ruminant. A ruminant being a cow, sheep, goats, elk, deer, they all chew a cud. And so when they eat plants with seeds, because they burp that cut up and they remasticate it over and over again like chewing gum, it crushes all the seeds. So nothing in their poop that can grow because everything's got crushed. Horse doesn't do that. It goes through them like crazy, like grass through us. And so a lot of the seeds they eat grow. So I mean, all these things, and then I'm realizing, wow, this is like the way nature kept the fuel down in the remote wilderness. I mean, we can do things obviously ag lands and around cities and industrial. There's a lot of applications, goats and lawnmowers and tillers, all those things. But out here in the mountains, you can hardly walk over these rocks. I mean, you're in a really good shape to run around. There's millions of acres out here in the far northwest, Pacific Northwest, Northern California. It's rugged terrain, and be bringing any kind of lawnmowers out here, and you're not going to graze it with livestock. That's a foul, because we have apex predators all over the place up here. We have wolves, lions, bears, wolves, coyotes, and because we have a collapse of the deer herbivory, the deer and the elk that used to be here in the millions are gone now. California, the collapse of the herd population here in California because of the mismanagement by Cal Fish and Wildlife, we're down 2 million deer in California. And that's relevant, John, because 2 million deer will eat, and I'm talking about the mix of black-tailed deer. We have a few mule deer left. They eat about 5 million tons of annual grass and brush. And that's the key word, annual, is important, because even if you do a prescribed burn, which creates more toxic fire or smoke, it comes right, the grass grows back next year again. So how many times are you going to burn the same area until you finally damage the soil permanently? Because the fires, when you do a prescribed burn in an area where you have a collapsed herbivory, the grass is so high, it burns abnormally hot. So we have a big shift in the ecology on the landscape. Without these herbivores, now that we have fires, they burn abnormally hot. That's what makes them catastrophic. So I'm seeing all of that, John, and I'm going, well, hold it. Right before my eyes, I'm looking at a potential solution.
Now, did you bring this information to the California Fish and Wildlife Department?
Yeah, I've been working diligently and trying to communicate not only what I learned initially. There's science out there that theorizes that the herbivory is managed by the herbivore. Dr. William J. Ripple has a big study out called the collapse of the world's largest herbivores, and they looked at the herbivory on 5 continents where they've collapsed, and in every case, catastrophic fire. Then subsequently, one of the cases in point was Australia. You can dig down in the dirt in any landscape, and you can find out how many big wildfires there are by the layer of carbon, in the soil.
Sure.
When the fire burns, the ash comes down, just like. So he did a study, and he found that in Australia, there's never a catastrophic fire until they killed off all the kangaroos. They just there. That was their large body herbivore in Australia. Well, after they did that,
Really?
catastrophic fire evolved on the continent. Yeah. So, and that's published. That's peer-reviewed, published. There's a whole bunch of universities on Dr. Ripple's study. And I had read that. But then what happened, John, that really sealed the deal for me personally and really got my passion going was we had a big fire up here 2 months after I did an interview with Colorado College. They came down here and actually filmed a documentary about my work with the horses as an ethologist and as an ecologist, watching what they do and how they do it. So they came down here and filmed 2 months before a big fire. Now, we didn't know this big fire was coming, obviously. So they did this full-on documentary and the big fire breaks created by this. And I'm talking about the value, the fire break, and the horses are right behind me off camera, and you can see them. And I'm talking about how valuable the fire, and then of course that documentary is called Fuel, Fire, and Wild Horses. So Fuel, Fire, and Wild Horses, YouTube. It's on Vimeo. It's an award-winning documentary. Fuel, Fire, and Wild Horses. They absolutely documented what I was saying in my thesis. Then 2 months later, we have the Klamathon fire show up here. 38,000 acre blaze. incinerated
Yeah.
the small town of Horn. And during that fire, I was on the fire line because the guys that came up here were from Fresno and they were lost, but they didn't know where they were on the map because this is wilderness. And I ran into them, and they said, "Oh, you live here? You're supposed to be gone, but oh, help us out. Where are we on the, you know?" And I go, "Yeah, my ranch is right there, and your map's no good because you're not even on this map." They gave them, here's the two fire commanders. They got a map with all these big logos on the bottom from the government: OES, BLM, U.S. Forest, Siskiyou County. And they're in the map. They're not even on the map that they gave them. They're below the logos. I told them, I looked at their map and I go, "Well, you're below the logos. I know where you are. You're down here, and you're the fire's coming up here." And I told them there's a lot of roads that's supposed to be on this map that aren't. And there's ranches that aren't. And they got panicky when they found out there was ranches that needed to be fire prep that weren't on the map, because part of what they do is they prevent oncoming fire, right? So structure protection is important. And then I said, "And there's big fire breaks up here the horses have made." And they go, "Oh, really?" I said, "Okay, that's it. You're our technical knowledge advisor." So I was a volunteer. I was on the fire line 9 days, and damage from the smoke. The toxins in that smoke are deadly. The toxins in the smoke killed my wife. She stayed to support my effort with Cal Fire and to also keep an eye on the horses. We were both worried. Neither one of us knew what wild horses would do with a big, really documented it. There is no research on that. So during the 9 days I was on the fire line, I was watching what the horses did. Interestingly, they weren't afraid of the fire at all. They were grazing right. They didn't see. Domestic horses would panic and run, and probably run through fences and run on the crazy stuff. Well, the wild horses didn't do that. They just kept grazing. And I'm looking at that, and I'm going, wow, nobody's seen this before. I'm seeing things that, and I was able to document it. I have a photograph of the horses right in front of the fire line with a fire truck on one side, and the flames. You can see the flames. They weren't afraid of it, and I'm thinking, that makes sense, because these are native wild horses. They were here too.
Right.
The horses you're looking at in the video right now, that's Equus caballus, the modern horse. They've been here 2 million years. That gene line has been here for 2 million years. Now, of course, there were reduced, but those were hybrids that were, inbred for certain characteristics and traits that people want. The Europeans that settled the United States after Columbus discovered it, they brought over their big horses. And see, here's the thing for any biologist or somebody. Our horses up here are little. They average about 700-800 pounds on average. There's some bigger ones. They're about 800 pounds, and they're about 13 hands high. Now, the science, this is settled science, I'm telling you. You can't put more than 20% of him on his back, or you'll kill him. If you ride too far with too much weight, you hurt the horse. So Europeans knew this, so they bred horses for knights and cavalry. You look at the Percheron and some of these other big Iberian Arab crosses. They're big horses. They're 1,400 pounds, 16 hands, over 17 hands. They can carry a Conquista that weighs 350 pounds with his equipment. Okay, you can't put 350 pounds on the back of an 800-pound horse. You can't do it. It'll kill him. Okay, so when I'm reading the research, John, is that the French were deep into the United States before any, and French explorers actually met the Sioux Lakota tribe, Missouri, just east of the Rockies, in hundreds. They were riding horses with spears. Now, Spanish horses they were looking at, and the French actually called them, and I'm quoting, Indian ponies. They're the ones that made that phrase well known. Indian ponies. Why did they say that? Well, from where those guys came from in France, horses that size were considered ponies. You know, a child would ride a horse tiny. So anyway, that's documents that Dr. Claire Henderson cites at Wall University. She's a French professor of cultural archaeology and journal in the museum in Oklahoma in French. And can you come look at this journal? It's in French. We don't read French. It looks really old.
Yeah.
So she went down there and she's, oh my goodness, this is the writings from one of the early explorers. So sadly, the government is not interested in the value they offer for fuel mitigation and catastrophic fire and toxic smoke, which, by the way, toxic smoke kills 5,000 Californians prematurely every year. And that's the important word, prematurely. This isn't a natural death rate, okay? So UCLA did an 11-year study, and my wife was dying. It took 10 months for that toxins in the smoke to kill her. So that was in 2019. So in 2000, just last year, 24, UCLA released this 11-year study showing that 55,000 Californians died prematurely over the course of the study. Moms, dads, grandpas, kids died prematurely, and the economic damage from that was $435 billion with a B. So, and you're showing some of the myth that the BLM publishes right there. The herds have no natural predators, and that's David Phillips, the Pulitzer Prize winner that was on that documentary with me. He was a news journalist and Pulitzer Prize winner. The bottom line is that the government has no solution, or they don't want a solution for all these deaths. Now, I had a big computer extrapolate the UCLA study, because that just related to California, right? He said, hey, computer, if we extrapolate the data across Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, what is the total death and what is the cost? And it came up with a number of 80,000 people dying prematurely every year, and the economic impact of that would be 1.5 trillion.
Yeah.
So it's shocking, and the government's actually monitoring the UCLA study now. You don't find it anywhere. You have to know to go look for it. The news doesn't talk about it. They've been told, shh, we're not talking about this because we don't have a solution, and we don't want to look stupid. So because that's really, they know what the solution is, because I've told them, you asked me the question and I gave you a long roundabout answer. I've been out there talking to documentarians. I've been doing documentary videos. That's actually me talking from a fire break right there. They hear it and they go, wow, that's an interesting idea, Bill, but they always have an excuse why they can't do it. Okay, so like I was talking with Victoria Christensen when she was the head of the United States Forest, and I have an email from her, and she says, yeah, I'd like your idea. I have 8,000 wild horses under my jurisdiction. I'd love to move them for fire fuel management. And she said, and I agree, they do that. So the bottom line is this, okay? She said that I don't have a law that lets me do what you want to do, Bill. And I said, well, you're the head of the Forest Service. Why don't you talk to the people that you know and talk about the money we save? Because right now we've got 70,000 horses in government holding camps. They're like FEMA camps. And American taxpayers $150 million a year feeding them hay. It's like putting the entire fire department in and then having to buy DoorDash to feed them every day. It's like, come on, people, 150 million a year. It doesn't make sense. Because we have million acres out here on fire, and they're on fire. There's grass and brush all over the place because there's no deer anymore. Not, there's a few, but not. And we're down to about under 380,000 in California. We used to have 3 million. Okay.
In Southern California, in Orange County, we had initiated someone tried a pilot program where they brought in live goats to eat the mountainsides, hillsides, not really mountains on the coast, but it seemed to have a positive effect. But how are goats different than like horses? Obviously, horses don't run wild in Orange County, but rhinos do. That's what they
Well,
say. Tell me.
a goat, they're little guys, most of them. You know, they might eat a couple of pounds of fuel a day. A deer, you know, each deer does about 1.5 year. Okay, a horse does about 5 tons. Okay, of fuel management. And so the thing about a goat, they're good in areas where you're not worried about soil erosion or crop. And you know what I mean by cover crop, right? And I'm not talking about strawberries or corn. I'm talking the natural plants that stabilize the soil and provide forage for birds and bees and you know the native cover crop. It's a soil stabilizer. And some of those cover crop nitrogen into the soil, you know, so they're nitrogen fixing plants. Now, when you put goats, which are ruminants, when they eat the seeds of those plants, they digest them. And so the seeds on the landscape, Mother Nature is kind of interesting because what she does is when plants and grasses throw off their, not all of them germinate right away. Some of them can sit there for 7, 8 years before they germinate. So Mother Nature doesn't put all of her eggs in one basket, hoping for a really good year next year. She has it set up so that, and you call that the seed bank. All the seeds on the ground that haven't germinated yet, but can and might and probably will, and some in years, are still the seed bank on the ground. Everywhere has that, except of course the ocean. But any landscape has got a seed bank. And so, what happens is you put goats and they eat all the plants and seeds, and then next year there's still seeds in the seed bank. So the plants grow, and everybody goes, "Oh, look, there's no damage at all. The ruminant, you know, problem." Well, that can go on for quite a few years before finally you see a decline in your cover. And when that happens, then you get catastrophic erosion, like we see in Malibu, where you know you get a heavy rain and half the mountain falls down on the highway, and or for instance, case in point, after the big Santa Barbara. Okay, remember that one back in 2017, I think. In Montecito, a big mudslide came down, killed I think 28 people. Almost covered Oprah's house there, and 4 children were buried in this mudslide. It was like a Lahore. It was 20 feet deep, came down off the mountain after that fire. See, that's what happens with the fire, because it's so hot now, it destroys the microbiome in the soil. It pasteurizes the soil 10 inches deep now. And that's based on, you know, studies from Idaho, the universities in Idaho, the soil scientists there. That means, and then it destroys all the roots. Everything that holds the ground together is, so of course what happens, it all comes down in the big rain. So the net of all of that, ruminants are good, goat, sheep are good in some areas. Around airports, down on the ground around the Palisades, you could use small goats. You know, there's different species of goats. Some of them are real little, you know, dwarf goats. I mean, they're about the size of a big Chihuahua. But they can run around and they can be managed by dogs. If you hit one with a car, it's not going to total out your vehicle, right? And so it's kind of like having a toolbox. You don't use a straight blade screwdriver to take out a Phillips head screw. You know, you got to use the right tool for the right job. And horse are ideal for deep wilderness if you're having a breeding herd, because you've got predators and you don't want to have your fire brigade get depleted by predators. So you need a breeding herd. So they'll maintain the herd size. They also do natural selection, which is good for genetic vigor. Okay, full stop. We have 70,000 horses that are sterilized in government holding right now. Okay, they're all sterilized. The stallions are gelded, and the mares are sterilized. They inject them with Gonacon. Now the gelding,
and these were wild horses.
And I know this from me. These were wild horses that were taken off, protected by President Nixon in 1971. The act is still valid. The intentions of the act are quite valid, in fact. They're American heritage. You can take a gelding and you could put them up in the hills in Malibu. They're just big, lazy lawnmowers. What geldings like to do is eat and then take a nap. And they reseed the landscape with their poop. And the poop contains microbiome, so they reintroduce anything the soil's missing. And they add humus to the soil. So they really condition your soil improve the cover crop, because you need to mow it. But like any good person that has a really great lawn, they'll tell you, what do you do to have a great lawn? You mow it, you fertilize it, and then you seed it. And that's how people have these great lawns. You know, you watch, well, that's what horses do. That's exactly what a horse does. They mow it, they reseed it, they fertilize it. You know, and the thing is you can't beat it. And it's free. See, they don't sue you. You put them in the wilderness. You get people out there, they fall down, they want to sue you. They want, compensation. Horses, and if they get eaten by a lion, livestock grazing, the ranchers want to tell you that the livestock are the silver bullet. They're not. They complain and moan if they lose a few cows down here in the ag areas on the flat ground. Oh, the wolves are putting us out of business. Well, why is that? I talk to ranchers sometimes. I said, why do you think that's happening? Oh, well, they're introducing wolves. Well, you don't think there were wolves in California before? There was a Mexican wolf here. Yeah, they did introduce Canis lupus, but the reason wolves are going after livestock is that's the only thing left on the menu, because we've lost 2 million deer. If there were deer, they would be eating the deer. They're not. And that's the thing. People don't understand the complexity of the ecosystem and how it all works together. It's a fund instrument. And it just doesn't work when you start pulling parts off of it. You can imagine pulling one piston out of the engine of your car. How good is it going to work then? The bottom line is the ranchers need to understand, if we restore, starting with the horses, it's going to take a while to get our deer back. I mean, we're going to need a moratorium on hunting in California. That's the bottom line there. And we've done that before. That's not a new idea, John. People don't even know their California history. In 1910, all the miners had been shooting so many game animals that the population of deer in California dropped to 500,000 animals. And the state had a moratorium on deer hunting then in 1910. So it went for 10 years to 1927. The deer got up to 3 million again, in California. Today, we're below 380,000. We're even lower than the last time they had a moratorium. But Cal Fish and Wildlife are so greedy, they keep selling deer tags. So when you have a collapsed herbivore,
William,
what's on the menu?
let me ask, just to step back a second. Can I ask, who made the decision to sterilize all these animals?
That's a good question. So the BLM has administratively collapsed the area that President Nixon assigned for wild horses. Okay, he calls them a heritage. They're part of our American heritage. They're an integral part of our wildlands. And he's in the preamble to the act. They're not to be rounded up, branded. They're not to be branded. They're not to be rounded up. They're not to be harassed, and they're not to be killed. BLM does all of that right now. They violate the intent of the act. It's an insult to that federal act, which is still law. Now, the thing is there's a lot of economic pressure to create more grazing, John. And so because of that, the BLM and the land managers that manage 245 million acres of BLM land, where there's 1.5 million head of cattle right now, they want to make more grazing because there's a lot of demand, and the people in the livestock industry have good political pull. So if you and I were in the cattle business, we'd want to be on that BLM land too, because you can get an AUM, which is a grazing metric for one cow and one calf per month, and the calf can be up to 500 pounds. Okay, so for one calf in a month, you pay the U.S. government $1.45. Now you can't feed a gerbil for $1.45 a month. Okay, now if you and I were in the same cattle business and we need to do off-range grazing on somebody's big 100-acre pasture, the going rate for private grazing right now is about $28 to $30 per calf per month. So $1.45 per month, or $28 or $30 per month. So you can see why everybody wants a federal grazing permit. It's a screaming deal. It's a deal of the century. So the thing that I look at is, okay, if the government wants to subsidize ranch, that's up to them. but they shouldn't be killing our traditional American horses that went to war. I mean, and people don't realize that in 1910 we had about 2 to 3 million wild horses in America. Okay, when 1918 rolled around, we sent 1 million of them to war in Europe. I mean, they became heroes just like our guys. You know, they were over there hauling troops around, hauling ammunition around. Some of them were eaten even. A lot of our soldiers died in the arms of their horse because there was all cavalry then. And so in World War One. So, and then we sent horses off to the Boer War on top of it. So, and then of course the pet food industry. You remember the movie The Mustangers with Clark Gable? That was about the rounding up wild horse for the pet food industry. And so we decimated our I mean, they helped us build America, and that's how we pay them back. Genocide. That's our payback. You know, we gotta get squared away here as humans.
Yeah, our head of Bureau of Land Management, acting head, is a man named Bill Groffey, who has a history in natural resources, looks like oil and gas.
Sure.
Does oil and gas not like wild horses?
No, I don't think they don't like him. I think he's a good guy for the job, quite frankly. But there's a big exception there. Wiping out the horses to have economic expansion is the wrong approach. It's absolutely the wrong approach. You know, all we have to do in our plan, we have a plan, by the way, proven plan called Wild Horse Fire Brigade. It's the name of our nonprofit. And that's why we call it Wild Horse Fire Brigade. It's a proven plan. You put the horses, no economic conflict, and we have, like I said, millions of acres of vacant wilderness where there's no gas, oil, minerals, or livestock. Loaded with predators. Nobody would dare put, cows up there. That'd be crazy. We got plenty of places. So we move off the landscape. Instead of doing the crazy stuff you see on the screen, chasing them around with helicopters, killing them, running them past their endurance. It's barbaric, it's an abomination, and it's an insult. It's an insult to these treasured heritage icons. You know, these guys are just as American as apple pie as me and you, okay? And what we're doing there, I mean, it's horrific. And so what we can do, and we have a law to do it right now, John, believe it or not, we have a law that allows us to do it. We can take horses out of areas where they're deemed excess. Okay, so the process is the BLM flies in, they go, oh, there's too many horses. And it's totally arbitrary. They just always say that, too many horses. Because they say that because they want to sell more grazing permits. So then, but the moment they do that, as soon as they say there's excess horses, another law kicks in. It's called the it's a Transfer of Excess Animals Act. So when a government agency says they have excess animals, any county agency, a state, any city, county, fire department, anybody can get those horses. And so the minute they deem, this is before the roundup, they have to sign the letter of excess determination. So on the Transfer of Excess Animals Act, any county, state, government official, city can contact the BLM. They say, hey, we see you determined that there's 400 excess animals and we want them. They got to give them to you by law at that point. And it saves taxpayers a fortune. And then the county, let's say, our county, I got a lot of fire here. Unfortunately, I don't have a voice in the county management or on the board or anything. You know, I try to influence the board with good facts, but our county could ask for horses and get them, and then we could repurpose them, deploy them into the deep wilderness and create big fire breaks, so that our fire department doesn't have to get. Fighting these fires now is really risky because they're so intense. But by reducing the fuel, guess what? The fire guys have more success. There's less injuries. The firemen, less smoke. I just got through telling you from toxic wildfire smoke. And we can do this today. I've gone to these people. I've sent letters out to legislators. The thing is we've got a big ship moving in a certain direction, right? You got these people that are making money on the roundups. You got, friends of people at the BLM. They go, oh, I don't want to lose my job. Well, you know what? You doing your job is putting the fire department in jail right now, and that's killing thousands of Americans. So I don't care about your job. You're one person or even 100 people at the BLM. I don't care if they lose their jobs. They got to go do something else, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm looking at the thousands of men, women, and children that die from the smoke. The smoke, the death from the toxic smoke every year, in 1 year, is more than all the deaths from the flames themselves over the last 100 years. We have 5,000 people in all these fires from the flames or houses burning down. We haven't done that. I mean, the worst fire ever was Paradise. We lost 80 people, I think, in Paradise, California. But when you compare that to losing 5,000 people a year in California every year from smoke,
Yeah.
how's the scale look? Right. So yeah, we can do it. And the thing is I work for free. I don't need to be doing this. I mean, I'm 73 now, John. I mean, I should be retired. I'm working 100 hours a week for free. We're an all-volunteer nonprofit. Everybody that's on our board works for free. And why do we do it? Because we want to save American lives. You know, when I raised my hand and I was sworn in as a U.S. Merchant Marine officer, I swore an oath to the Constitutional Republic and to my fellow citizens. You know, that doesn't end. When you swear that kind of an oath, that doesn't just disappear, you know.
Yep.
And then, you know, I got a chip in the game. I watched my wife die over 10 months from this toxins. And then I find out that what I endured, 5,000 other people are enduring that every year. That's wrong. We got to fix it. And it's fixable.
Do you have any allies in Congress?
Not yet. It's kind of a go along to get along thing. We had worked for the state of Oregon in natural resource management. She's got an advanced degree, smart lady. And she went to her boss and said, you know, we got to do this Wild Horse Fire Brigade and get some horses into the remote forests and start protecting these forests. They put her on leave.
Yeah. The inmates are running the asylum, friend.
Right. Yeah, what people don't know. See, I was a logger too. Growing up, you know, in the late 60s, early 70s, I logged. You know, and my brother-in-law was indigenous. You know, he was a Klamath tribal member. His dad was shaman. We learned the old hunting, tracking, fishing, logging, all grandfather trees to reseed the hillsides. Log below the grandfather trees because they'll reseed it naturally down the hill. I learned a lot, you know, about natural resource management and some of the old appearing quickly in favor of wisdom about casinos. And so the bottom line right now is we're in a position where a few people make so much money and those few people have a lot of clout. And it seems like they don't care about the other 99.999% of the Americans who are suffering because of bad management. And especially, it'd be one thing if we had no solution. Do we have a solution for hurricanes, John? No, we can't stop her. Do we have a solution for tidal waves? No, we don't. But one thing we can control, you know, it's arson, there's bad people who want to, well, here's the thing. We can't control lightning. We can't control human behavior. The one thing we can control is the amount of fuel on the landscape. That's well within our control. And we have a tool, nature's lawnmowers, that we can use immediately. And you know, the thing is people think I'm anti-livestock, anti-cattle. I'm not. We have one of the leading livestock producers in America on our board endorsing us. You know, he's the founder of the Kansas Cattlemen's Association, you know. So he's on the RCAF board. He's on OCM. His name is Mike Schultz. And Mike is a real patriot. He's a good man. He's a straight shooter. He's a real cowboy, straight shooter. And so he said, you know, Bill, I like your plan because when we move these horses out of the holding area, we save $150 million immediately. That's not make-believe or projected. That's immediate savings, $150 million. And if I was on the Maha People's Choice, I was nominated number 7 for 400 jobs in natural resources. I was number 7. I haven't got my phone call yet.
Wow.
On Kennedy's Maha. Okay,
wonder why.
What's that about? Yeah. And so the thing is if I was the head of the BLM Wild Horse and Burro program, and I've been interviewed about that on TV, on CBS and NBC, first thing I would do is end that off-range holding program and take that $150 million a year, and I would improve all the grades with it. the BLM manages. I would drill wells. I would reseed. All the areas that are overgrazed or declined from a lot of grazing, I could put 150 million a year into that and improve the grazing. And then I would relocate horses out of those areas. I wouldn't round them up the way they're doing with helicopters. I'd bait them in and because they already got the trailers and all that stuff, and move them into the deep vacant wilderness where there's no competition economically, and where their populations are controlled for time immemorial by predators. Then, by doing that, guess what? I create 350,000 more AUMs. In other words, what that is room for 350,000 cow-calf pairs on the land. I mean, that's almost 500,000 grazing permits with my plan. So, and by protecting my forests out here, I save the logging industry, because here's what's going on with these forests. We are burning forests faster than they grow. And we have no wood to rebuild houses. We're having to bring in wood from Canada, and now they're burning down. Where are we going to get wood from? I mean, we need to fix this problem. And if the wipes out these horses, it's a genocide too. Because like I just pointed out early in the show, there's a big difference between the wild horses and the domestic horses. They're totally different animals. They eat differently. They're different in size. The genetics are way different. The genes are important in these horses. But if we let them finish wiping them out, what they're doing, the ones that are still on the range that haven't been rounded up yet, they're running around shooting them full of Gonacon. So they're sterilizing them. I mean, there's already under 100,000 horses on the range, John, and the rest of them are genetically dead, so you can't even count those. So we're down to about 50,000 horses left on the range. How do we know that? Oh, gee whiz, let's see. We're digging up graves with Indians and horses buried that are dated at 5,700 years before present. That's like almost 8,000 years after the Ice Age ended. Okay, here's indigenous people with horses 5,700 years before, which is way before Columbus came with his horses. So how's that happen? See, they've been constantly lying to the public and to Congress. And that has to end. That's got to end. And they also lie by omission. They pretend like, oh, well, I've had them with me on CBS Investigative News. Oh, well, there's no law that allows Bill to relocate horses. Wrong. There is a law right now. It's a federal act. It's called the Humane Transfer of Excess. See, but they won't tell you about that. And guess what? It's right on their own website, John. If you Google Humane Transfer of Excess Animals, it's right at the BLM's own website. BLM, Humane Transfer of Excess Animals. And it comes right up. But you could look at the BLM, you could meet a BLM officer or their PIO, public information guy, and you could say, hey, is there any way we can do Bill's plan? Can we put can we move them? Is there any way to move them into some other land? They go, oh no, there's no way to do that. But right on their own says there's a way to do that. See, that really makes me mad as a taxpayer.
Yeah.
I don't like it when I'm looking at somebody who works for me, a public servant. They work for you, me, and all the other Americans. We're the boss. I mean, it's not of the government, for the government, and by the government. That's not what a constitutional republic is. Okay, they work for us. They're civil servants. And when I had my corporations, if one of my employees came up and lied in my face, there's the door. You're gone.
They don't like it when you lead with that, by the way.
You know what?
You work for me.
I really
now do your damn job. They don't go for it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't care, because I'm looking at a stack of 5,000 dead people every year here in California. 5,000 corpses. Yeah. Americans, moms, dads, children, grandpas. They're lost. Their families are grieving.
William, this should also actually align with the Trump administration. He was talking about how the biggest problem with California and its wildfires was that we weren't cutting or keeping the brush from overgrowing. And he was suggesting they do controlled burns, but this seems like an even better option.
Well, controlled burns add to the toxins. See, we talked about fuel loads, okay? When we had 2 million deer, if you go back 20 years, if you did a controlled burn, it burned slow and low and made less fire and less heat because the grass is short. I mean, what happens if you got no logs in the fireplace? You don't have much fire, not much heat. You throw a few logs in there and boy, you know. So right now, if you do a controlled burn, it burns abnormally hot and it damages the soil. It produces super. Here's the thing. I fought fires back in the day. For the first time in history of wildfires, we're seeing molten. That's how hot these fires are now. Aluminum engine blocks, molten. Aluminum mag wheels, melted. Aluminum ladders, melted. It's because these fires are over 1,500 degrees now. What happens in pyrochemistry? If you put 3 ingredients in a test tube and you heat it at like 800 degrees or 1,000 degrees, which is a normal forest fire, you get certain resulting compounds, okay, every time. If I take those same ingredients in the same ratios and I heat them up at 1,500 degrees, I get brand new compounds. And that's what UCLA is talking about. That's what Dr. Michelle Block at Indiana Medical University is talking about. We're getting these new hydrocarbons. And I mean, it's burning, John, for the first time. And this is even in prescribed fires. Doesn't matter if it's fire is fire. Prescribed just means we lit it. You know, a lightning fire, okay, nature lit it. Same thing. It's burning abnormally hot. But the thing is they're so hot, John, that they're heating the soil and pasteurizing them 10 inches deep. It kills all the microbiome. And on top of that, it causes the minerals in the soil to sublimate into the hot gaseous mass, which helps create new chemistry. Sublimation, for the audience, is when a solid passes its liquid phase and goes directly into a gaseous phase. So dry ice does that. Dry ice is a solid and it goes right to a gas. Okay, it skips its sublimation. Okay, normally you go from solid to liquid to gas, but these fires are so hot it's causing the minerals in the ground to sublimate into the superheated gaseous mass. And when you start introducing heavy metals and other things with terpenes that are heated at super high temperatures and other chemistry, you get all kinds of bizarre stuff. We've never seen it before, and that's what's killing everybody. You can't prescribe burn as a bad prescription.
So when we're approaching about an hour, is there, what's your call to action right now? Donations. People can go to support your work at, got your website right here, Wild Horse Fire Brigade.
That's correct. They can go to horsefirebrigade.org. It's 4 words, Wild Horse Fire Brigade. You could Google Wild Horse Fire, comes right up. In case you forget, it's the .org.
I got it on the bottom of the screen right here.
Us, thank you. And we don't pay ourselves a penny salary. I'm doing this because people are dying, and I don't want to see people go through the anguish. It's terrible watching somebody die from this stuff. And then, so we're spending that money. We also teach wild horse ecology up here for Cal State. We pay for that out of our donations. This is an funded program. It's a fellowship program because the professor there, who did his PhD in wild horses, by the way, so we know he knows his stuff, and we have two PhDs on our board. Another one from Arizona State also did her PhD in wild horses. They joined our organization because they know we're on the cutting edge up here, and we're doing research and proving things that they want out. Really, they really don't want to. Gee, Bill, we really don't. We're not ready for you yet. Because we're on endangered species territory. If they wipe them all up and wipe them out, and then they go, oh well, yeah, they were native now. They will truly be extinct when the BLM's done with them. That's the problem.
Right.
And we're in a race to save this important tool for firefighting. So, but yeah, we have supporting our organization.
We have a really strange situation going on in this world. The ostrich farm situation in Canada was one that I helped sort of push out into the limelight 11 months ago, 9 months ago, something like that. Anyway, they just got slaughtered last week. So we've got governments that are out of control. I mean, they really seem to be on self-destruct mode. So I hope that you can get some attention to our congressman in D.C. and in California, and perhaps we can get you some attention with this interview.
I appreciate it. I mean, your time is valuable to me, and I appreciate it.
So William, thank you so much. Everybody, you can go check out his website at wildhorsefirebrigade.org. And you can also watch the documentary that he's talking about on that web page. And please feel free to donate. Thank you so much for taking time to meet with me, Bill.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And that's it for